What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Mushroom Kingdom. Hit y'all with part 5 of the Muffin Man. Y'all gonna love this one. Sick. Peak.
Chapter Ticks, The Tune of Terror. It started with a package. Every major news station in Los Angeles received one. No return address, no markings, just a single word scrawled across the front in deep red ink. Play. The producers hesitated. The last time the Muffin Man sent a tape, it broke the city. But curiosity was a disease, and so they pressed play. The broadcast that froze Los Angeles. The screen flickered, static, then a kitchen. A dim, flickering bulb swung overhead, casting long, sickly shadows. And sitting at the center of it, in a chair too neatly placed, was the Muffin Man. Peter, smiling, calm, waiting. He said nothing. Instead, he reached to the side and lifted an old cassette player. He pressed play, and then it began. A tune. Faint at first, childlike. The nursery rhyme every kid once knew. Do you know the Muffin Man? But it was wrong. The notes were warped, off-key, stretched into something sick. The speed slowed, then twisted, then picked up again, like the song itself was alive and rotting. The sound curled under skin. The melody embedded itself into memory. It was a warning. And then, as the song reached its end, Peter spoke. Whenever you hear my tune, a pause, smile. Dread, the fear is coming. The screen cut to black. And the city never slept again. Chapter X, The Dead Man's Tune. It started as a whisper, a haunting melody that drifted through the city like a slow-moving plague. People heard it in odd places. A car radio cutting to static, a distant hum from a playground swing, a street performer strumming a tune they swore they had never learned. At first, they didn't recognize it, but then the realization sank in. The notes were wrong, twisted, distorted, and the moment they understood, the fear began, because they knew what came next. Chapter X, Breaking the Pattern. For the first time in years, McNabb had a chance, a real chance. He wasn't too late this time. The girl, Emily Carter, 10 years old, had been taken from her bedroom. Her mother had woken up to the window open, curtains billowing, and on the windowsill, a muffin, still warm. McNabb didn't wait for backup, didn't waste time asking questions, because he knew. He knew where he would take her. The same kind of place he always used. Abandoned, forgotten, hidden in plain sight. This time, an old butcher shop, shuttered for years. McNabb's tires screeched as he tore down the empty streets, heart pounding. If he was wrong, the girl was already dead. But if he was right, then for the first time, he could change the ending. The butcher's house. McNabb kicked the door in. The air was thick with the suffocating scent of sugar and decay. Somewhere inside, a muffled cry. Emily? McNabb's pulse spiked. He moved fast, gun drawn. I'm getting you out. A faint rustling from the back room. A shadow shifted. And then a voice. Johnny, I was hoping you'd come. And there he was, the Muffin Man, smiling, waiting, between him and the girl, and McNabb had seconds to make his move. Chapter X, The Escape. McNabb had seconds. Emily was in the back room, tied to a chair, tear-streaked face, wide, terrified eyes, and between them, the Muffin Man. Peter stood calmly, like he had been waiting for this moment. Go on, Johnny. He tilted his head. Take her. McNabb's grip tightened on his gun. But something in Peter's smile told him exactly what he already knew. He wanted McNabb to fight, wanted him to hesitate. And that's when McNabb made his move. The only way out. McNabb lunged not at Peter but past him. Peter reached for him, too late. McNabb crashed into the back room, knocking over a rusted table. He was already moving, yanking a knife from his belt and cutting Emily free. Hold on to me, kid. Emily nodded, sobbing. No time, no hesitation. McNabb grabbed her and ran. The chase. Peter's laughter echoed behind them. Running, Johnny. After all this time? Mick barreled through the shop, Emily clinging to his chest. The door was too far. Peter was too fast. No way out except one. McNabb spotted a grimy, dust-covered window. No time to think. He turned his body, shielding Emily, and crashed through the glass. Into the night. They hit the pavement hard. McNab felt something crack in his ribs, but he didn't stop moving. Emily was safe, still breathing. That was all that mattered. He scooped her up, staggered to his feet. Sirens in the distance. Peter stood in the broken window, smiling. McNab met his eyes. For the first time, McNab had won. Peter only tilted his head, and then he was gone. Safe, for now. McNab held Emily tight as officers flooded the street. Sandoval grabbed his shoulder. "You okay?" McNab didn't answer. He just stared at the empty shop. Because even though Emily was safe, even though he had saved her, he knew this wasn't over. Chapter X. Welcome to the Blueberry Zone. The news anchors couldn't even read the message aloud. It had arrived in every newsroom in the city, a thick envelope containing pages soaked in blue ink and blood. The headline? The Blueberry Zone awaits. No demands, no ransom, just a warning. I've built something new, a place where the real fun begins. You won't see it coming, but your children will. They already have. And at the bottom, one final chilling line. If you hear the dead man's tune, you're already inside. The children see it first. It started in classrooms. Kids jerked awake at their desks, screaming about a place they had never been, but somehow knew. It's dark. There's a chair. It's wet, sticky. The walls are blue, not paint. Something else. There's a table. There's knives. There's something waiting. The teachers tried to calm them. The parents tried to explain it away. But the kids knew. They had seen the Blueberry Zone. And the worst part, some of them said they had seen who was next. McNab's breaking point. McNab stood in the precinct, staring at the message. His stomach twisted, because even before the analysts confirmed it, before they tested the dark blue stains on the paper, he already knew. The ink was blood. And it wasn't just blood. It was from someone still alive. Someone already inside the Blueberry Zone, waiting for him, waiting for death. And McNab? He had no idea where to start. Because how do you find a place that only exists in nightmares? Chapter X. The Hunt for the Blueberry Zone. McNab had nothing, no location, no leads, no way to track the Muffin Man's next move. All he had was a city drowning in fear and a name that meant nothing. The Blueberry Zone. But it had to be real. And if it was real, McNab would find it. Because if he didn't, someone was going to die. The search begins. McNab tore apart everything. Every missing person case in the last 2 months. Every abandoned building that had been bought, sold, or forgotten. Every goddamn bakery that had ever been shut down in the last 20 years. It wasn't enough. Because the Muffin Man was always ahead. And this time, he wasn't just hiding a body, he was hiding a place. The children know McNab wasn't a believer in the supernatural. He never had been. But when parents started calling in, when entire classrooms of kids started drawing the same room, he listened. Blue walls, a chair in the center, chains, a table covered in knives. McNab studied the drawings. His skin crawled. They weren't just describing a room. They were describing a real place. Because some of the kids, they weren't just seeing it in dreams. They were smelling it. They were hearing things. Like a song, just barely there. The dead man's tune, and one little girl, her voice shaking, her fingers clutching the armrest of her chair, said 4 words that made McNab's stomach drop. It's under the city. A lead in the dark. McNab's mind raced. Underground. If the Blueberry Zone was real, then it wasn't in an abandoned house or a hidden warehouse. It was beneath them. The old tunnels, the forgotten places. McNab pulled up city records, sewers, subway expansions that were never completed, hidden storage rooms beneath factories. And then he found something, a shut-down food processing plant. Once used for grain, flour, yeast, it had a basement, and according to the blueprints, that basement went deeper. Much deeper. McNab's breath came sharp, because if he was right, if the Blueberry Zone was down there, then the next victim was already inside, waiting, screaming. And McNab was running out of time. Chapter X, a place that shouldn't exist. McNab had been wrong. This wasn't about a location. It wasn't about blueprints, basements, or hidden tunnels. The Blueberry Zone wasn't real until you heard the dead man's tune. Then it became real. And once you were inside, there was no way out. The first victim slips away. McNab was racing toward the abandoned food plant when the call came in. Another one's missing, sir. Who? 12-year-old. Noah Hastings. His mom found his bed empty this morning, windows locked, door still bolted from the inside. Did she hear anything? A long pause. Not her. His little sister. She said she woke up and heard a song. McNab's knuckles whitened on the wheel. The tune? Yeah. A shaky breath. She said it was coming from his room, and when she opened the door, he was gone. Somewhere else. Couldn't see. Everything was dark, cold, wrong. One moment, he had been in bed, safe, warm, the song. It had drifted through his room, low and sickly sweet. His ears rang, his stomach twisted, and before he could even scream, he was here. In a room with blue walls, with a chair in the center, and something waiting in the shadows. At McNab's realization. He slammed the brakes, heart hammering. The Blueberry Zone wasn't a place. It was a sentence. A trap. A reality that only existed for the people who heard the tune. Which meant McNab had been searching in the wrong place all along. And Noah Hastings? He was already inside. And there was no way to bring him back. Chapter X, trapped in the Blueberry Zone. Noah shivered. The air was thick, damp, suffocating. It smelled like something sweet and rotting, like muffins left out for too long. He blinked fast, trying to adjust to the dark, but the room was wrong. The walls, deep, unnatural blue, seemed to breathe around him. There was no door, no windows, just a single chair in the center of the room. And then, the voice. Welcome, little one. Noah spun, his heart pounding. Something shifted in the shadows, footsteps slow and deliberate, moving toward him. Then, a face emerged, grating. Do you know where you are? The voice was gentle, amused. Noah's throat locked up. He couldn't speak. The figure stepped closer, the Muffin Man, and in his hand, a tray, with a single muffin, still steaming, still fresh. You're in the Blueberry Zone, Noah, and no one leaves the Blueberry Zone. The table of deeds. Noah backed away, his breathing sharp and panicked. The floor beneath him felt sticky, wet. He didn't want to look down, didn't want to see what he was standing in. The Muffin Man set the tray down on a long metal table. Noah hadn't noticed it before, didn't know if it had always been there. But now he saw. The table was covered in knives, blades of all sizes, some rusted, some too clean. And next to them, a mixing bowl, deep, dark with something thick. I have a question for you, Noah. The Muffin Man's fingers traced over a butcher's knife. Do you think you taste sweet? Noah screamed. Chapter X, the taste of fear. Noah's screams didn't echo. The walls swallowed the sound, as if the Blueberry Zone itself was hungry. The Muffin Man simply sighed. No need for that, little one. He picked up the butcher's knife, turning it slowly in his hand. The dim blue light reflected off the blade. No one can hear you here. Noah stumbled back, his bare feet slipping on the cold, sticky floor. His stomach twisted. Don't look down, don't look down. But he did, and what he saw made his breath shatter. The floor wasn't blue. It was covered in something thick, dark, pulpy, something wet. Like crushed berries, like meat. Noah gagged. The Muffin Man laughed softly. I call it my secret. The oven warms. A click. A low, distant hum. Behind the Muffin Man, a large industrial oven flared to life. The heat crept forward, crawling over Noah's skin. The Muffin Man tilted his head. I hope you don't mind, but I prefer my muffins warm. Noah's pulse pounded in his ears. Please. His voice cracked. Please. I just want to go home. The Muffin Man's smile softened. Oh, Noah? He stepped forward, lowering himself so they were eye to eye. You are home now. The final ingredient. The Muffin Man reached for the mixing bowl. dipped 2 fingers inside, scooped up a thick blue-black paste. He held it up for Noah to see. "Do you know what this is?" Noah's head shook violently. He didn't want to know. He already knew. The Muffin Man sighed. "I had such high hopes for you." Then the lights flickered. Noah felt the room shift. Something cracked, like the world was splitting at the seams. And for the first time, the Muffin Man's smile faltered. Just a little. Noah didn't understand why, but then he heard it, a voice, distant, calling his name. "Noah!" It sounded like his mom. A sob tore from his throat. He turned toward the sound. "Mom." The Muffin Man's grip tightened on the knife. No. The tear in the nightmare. The walls shook. The floor cracked. The blueberry zone began to break because someone was waking Noah up. Someone was pulling him back. And the Muffin Man knew, if Noah back to chapter 6, the taste of fear. Noah's screams didn't echo. The walls swallowed or cracked. Noah clutched her shirt, sobbing. His skin was cold. His feet were wet. His hands stained with something dark. He lifted them slowly, fingers sticky, deep blue, like blueberry filling. His stomach lurched because he had escaped, but the blueberry zone had followed him back, and somewhere, he knew, the Muffin Man was still waiting. Chapter X, the one who got away. Noah, the nightmare never ends. Noah sat in his bed, knees curled to his chest, staring at his hands. The dark blue stains had faded, wiped away by his mother's desperate scrubbing, but he could still feel it. Sticky, thick, wrong. Like he had been touched by something that wasn't supposed to exist. His mother sat beside him, stroking his hair. "It was just a dream, sweetheart." Noah flinched. It wasn't a dream. It was real. Because he remembered the heat of the oven. He remembered the smell of burned sugar and blood. He remembered the Muffin Man's voice whispering at the edge of his ear. "I decide when you wake up," Noah shook. Because even though he had escaped, he didn't feel free. He felt like something was still watching him. Like something was waiting. And when he blinked, just for a second, he swore he saw a shadow in the corner of his room, smiling. The Muffin Man pureage. The blueberry zone was silent, empty, cold. The chair in the center sat vacant. The knives on the table untouched. The oven, still warm. The Muffin Man stood there, seething, his fingers curled into fists, knuckles turning white. This had never happened before. No one escaped the blueberry zone. Not until now. And it wasn't Noah's doing. It was something else. Something that had pulled him back. A force that had ripped the boy from his grasp. And the Muffin Man? He wasn't going to let that happen again. He turned slowly, eyes dark. "All right then, Johnny. If you want to play like that." A slow, deliberate smile crept across his lips. "Let's make this interesting." Chapter X, the boy who came back. McNabb didn't believe in nightmares. He believed in monsters. Real ones. The kind that left bodies gutted, that turned fear into something that choked a city. But as he sat across from Noah Hastings, listening to the boy's shaking voice, something inside him shifted. Because what Noah described? It wasn't just a dream. It was worse. The family's desperation. Noah's parents had called the precinct at dawn. His mother's voice had been frantic. "You need to come, please, he's not okay." McNabb had expected another terrified family. Another kid with a bad dream after hearing about the Muffin Man's return. But the second he stepped into their house, he knew this was different. Noah sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. His face was pale, eyes hollow. He didn't move when McNabb entered. He just stared at his hands. Like he could still feel something on them. His mother ran a hand through his hair. "Tell him, baby. Tell him what you told us." Noah swallowed. Then he spoke the blueberry zone in his words. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a dream. His voice was small, empty. "I was there. I woke up and I wasn't in my room anymore. It was wrong. Everything was blue. The walls, the floor, but not like paint. It was like it was made of something, sticky, thick." McNabb leaned forward. "Like crushed berries?" Noah's breath hitched. He nodded. It smelled sweet at first, like a bakery, but then it started to rot. The air got thick. I could feel it in my mouth, on my skin, like I was breathing something bad. And then I saw him. The Muffin Man. Noah's face twisted. He was waiting for me. He said I was home, that nobody leaves the Blueberry Zone. McNabb's jaw tightened. Did you see anything else? Other people? Other kids? Noah's small hands clenched. No people, but there was a table, a big metal one, with knives and a bowl. McNabb's stomach turned. What was in the bowl, Noah? Noah's lips trembled. Something thick, dark, like jam, but it wasn't. His voice dropped to a whisper. I think it was people. His mother covered her mouth, choking on a sob. McNabb felt something in his chest crack. Noah. His voice was steady, but his pulse pounded. How did you get out? Noah's breathing quickened. I don't know. I heard my mom's voice calling me. The walls started shaking. The Muffin Man got mad, like he was losing me. And then? Noah looked at him. Then I woke up. And your hands? McNabb nodded at them. They were already stained? Noah nodded slowly. Blue, like I had touched something, but it wasn't from here. It was from there. His blood felt cold, because the Blueberry Zone wasn't a place in the real world, and yet it had followed Noah back. McNabb's realization. As he drove back to the precinct, Noah's words rattled in his skull. Nobody leaves the Blueberry Zone. But Noah had, which meant one thing: the Muffin Man had lost a victim. And if that was true, then McNabb knew exactly what was coming next. Payback. Chapter X. The lesson no one wanted to hear. Noah sat in the center of the classroom. Every eye was on him. The kids had heard the rumors, whispers in the hallways, murmurs on the playground. But now, straight from Noah's own mouth, they were about to hear the truth. And no one was ready. The story begins. I was there. Noah's voice was steady. Cold. Not like a kid telling a scary story. Like a kid who had lived it. The Blueberry Zone is real. And once you're inside, you don't leave. The classroom was silent. Even the kids who usually laughed off ghost stories didn't make a sound. Noah's hands clenched the edge of his desk. It smelled sweet at first, like fresh muffins, but then it starts to rot. The air gets thick, and it feels like you're breathing something bad, like something's getting inside you. A kid in the back swallowed hard. Another hugged her arms. Noah continued. The walls aren't blue paint. They're made of something sticky, wet, like crushed berries, but not just berries. It feels like skin. A girl let out a soft whimper. The teacher, Mrs. Caldwell, finally snapped. Noah, that's enough. But no one looked at her, because Noah wasn't done, and no one wanted him to stop. The horrors of the Blueberry Zone. There's a chair in the middle of the room. Noah's voice dropped lower. It's not empty. A few kids shifted in their seats. And there's a table with knives. Some are clean, some aren't. And there's a bowl filled with something dark. His breath. I think it's people. A few kids gasped. One covered their ears. Mrs. Caldwell stepped forward. Noah, stop. You're scaring everyone. Then from the back of the room, a voice. No, you stop it. The whole class turned. It was Carter Langley. A tall kid, the kind that usually bullied the little ones. But right now, he looked scared. You're just mad because you know it's true, Carter said, his voice tight. The Blueberry Zone is going to come for all of us, and there's nothing we can do about it. The room felt colder. Because kids are going to start falling asleep. He looked around, his face pale. And once people start falling asleep, and you hear the dead man's tune, it's over. Noah's final words. Noah stared down at his hands. You don't have to be asleep. His voice was flat, empty. The class stilled. You can hear it when you're awake. And if you hear it, he lifted his head, his eyes hollow. You're already in the Blueberry Zone. Mrs. Caldwell's breath hitched, because the way Noah said it, like a fact, like a sentence, like the Muffin Man had total control. And fear spread through the room like a sickness, because suddenly every kid in that class was afraid to fall asleep. And worse, they were afraid to stay awake. Because what if they heard it? What if the dead man's tune started playing? And what if, right now, they were already inside? Would you like to follow the kids as Chapter X. Fear takes root. The school, a disease of dread. No one talked at recess. No one played tag. No one swung from the monkey bars. Instead, kids huddled in small circles, whispering. Did you hear Noah? My sister said she saw a blue room in her dream last night. What if we're already in it? Shut up, don't say that. Some kids cried. Some kids wouldn't close their eyes. By lunchtime, a girl had a full-blown panic attack in the hallway. By the end of the day, 5 kids had gone home sick. And Mrs. Caldwell? She sat in the teacher's lounge, hands clutching her coffee cup, staring into the distance. Because the truth was, she was scared too. Because what if Noah was right? What if the tune could come when you were awake? And what if, right now, it was already playing? The Muffin Man, thriving in the fear. Somewhere else, in the heart of a city that had long since surrendered to his game, the Muffin Man laughed. It was happening. The fear was spreading. Not because he had killed again. Not because he had sent a message. But because he had done something far worse. He had planted an idea. And an idea was a virus. An idea didn't need a knife. It didn't need an oven. It just needed belief. Because the moment people believed in the Blueberry Zone, it became real. And the moment they feared the tune, it was already playing. Somewhere in a small bedroom, a child was shaking under the covers. Somewhere, a mother was checking the locks twice. Somewhere, a detective was coming apart at the seams. And the Muffin Man, he was just getting started. Chapter X. The fear that won't stop growing. McNabb sat in his car outside Noah's school, gripping the steering wheel so tight his fingers felt numb. The call had come in from the principal. Detective, I think you need to see this. McNabb had expected another shaken parent, another kid scared out of their mind. But what he found was worse. A school-wide panic. Kids crying, kids refusing to sleep. A teacher trembling as she whispered, I swear, I heard humming in the hallway. I thought she shook her head. I thought I smelled muffins. McNabb had seen cities paralyzed by terror before, but this was different. This wasn't fear of a man. This was something bigger. Something that had crawled into their heads. And the worst part? It was working. Because even McNabb, logical, hardened McNabb, could feel something wrong in the air. Like the fear itself was a pulse, and it was getting louder. Elsewhere, the first one hears it. Samantha Reeves was walking home from school. Her mom had told her to wait for a ride, but she wasn't scared, or at least she told herself she wasn't. But as she walked, something shifted. The air grew thick. The streetlights flickered. And then, the sound. Faint at first. A soft, slow melody drifting through the empty street. Do you know the Muffin Man? Samantha, her breath caught. It wasn't coming from a speaker. It wasn't playing on a radio. It was just there. Like the sound was inside her own skull. A low, warped, broken tune. The dead man's tune. Her legs shook. And then, the smell. Warm, sweet, rotting. The scent of burned sugar and flesh. Her hands flew to her mouth. She turned in a full circle, heart hammering. No one was there. No one was playing it. And yet, the tune got louder. And then she felt it. The ground beneath her feet wasn't concrete anymore. It was soft, sticky. She looked down, and the pavement was blue. Samantha screamed. But it was too late, because she was already in the Blueberry Zone, and there was no way out. Chapter X. Nowhere left to run. Samantha. The Blueberry Zone is where Samantha tried to run. But the moment she moved, her feet sank. The blue floor beneath her wasn't pavement anymore. It was soft, sticky, alive. She gasped, trying to rip herself free, but with every step, she sank deeper. And then, a voice. It's different when you're awake, isn't it? Her head snapped up. A shadow stood at the edge of the twisted blue corridor ahead. And then, it stepped forward, the Muffin Man, smiling, waiting. Welcome, Samantha. You don't have to sleep anymore. You're already here. The kids are disappearing again. The call came in as he was leaving the school. Detective, we got a situation. McNabb didn't breathe. Who? Kid named Samantha Reeves, 12 years old, was walking home from school. Mom said she never made it. McNabb's stomach coiled. What do you mean, never made it? I mean, 1 second she was there and the next, a pause, a long choking silence. She was gone. McNabb gritted his teeth, already racing to his car. I want surveillance footage. Anything right now. That's the thing, sir. What? The cameras didn't catch anything. McNabb's pulse spiked. That's not possible. I know, sir, but 1 second she's walking down the street and the next? It's like she was never there. McNabb slammed his fist against the dashboard because he knew the Blueberry Zone was real, and it was hunting. The Hollywood Hills Massacre. The Carmichael family was wealthy, powerful, safe, or at least that's what they thought. They lived in a gated mansion overlooking Los Angeles, protected by security systems, cameras, and locks. But none of that mattered, because that night, as they sat down for dinner, a sound filled the house. Soft, haunting, wrong. A melody that shouldn't exist in the real world. Do you know the Muffin Man? Mr. Carmichael froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. His wife gripped the table. The kids looked around in confusion. Then, the air changed. The walls shifted. Chapter X. Nowhere left to run. Samantha, the Blueberry Zone is real. Samantha tried to run, but the moment she moved, her feet sank. The blue floor beneath her wasn't pavement anymore. It was soft, sticky, alive. She gasped, trying to rip herself free, but with every step she sank deeper. And then, a voice. It's different when you're awake, isn't it? Her head snapped up. A shadow stood at the edge of the twisted blue corridor ahead, and then it stepped forward. The Muffin Man, smiling, waiting. Welcome, Samantha. You don't have to sleep anymore. You're already here. The kids are disappearing again. The call came in as he was leaving the school. Detective, we got a situation. McNabb didn't breathe. Who? Kid named Samantha Reeves, 12 years old, was walking home from school. Mom said she never made it. McNabb's stomach coiled. What do you mean, never made it? I mean, 1 second she was there and the next, a pause. A long, choking silence. She was gone. McNabb gritted his teeth, already racing to his car. I want surveillance footage. Anything. Right now. That's the thing, sir. What? The cameras didn't catch anything. Chapter X. Nowhere left to run. Samantha, the Blueberry Zone is real. Samantha tried to run, but Chapter X. Nowhere left to run. The Blueberry Zone is real. Samantha tried to raise to life. And the doors slammed shut, baking them alive. The floor was sticky beneath their feet. And the smell, God, the smell. Burnt sugar, melted flesh. The Blueberry Zone. Mr. Carmichael turned, panting. What is this? Where are we? A shadow moved near the ovens, then a voice. Dinner time. The Muffin Man stepped forward, holding a tray still steaming, still fresh. And as the family screamed, the ovens roared to life. And the doors slammed shut, baking them alive. Would you like to continue with McNabb arriving at the Carmichael mansion too late? Or the... Chapter X, the fire that couldn't be stopped. Too late again. By the time McNabb reached the Carmichael mansion, the flames were already swallowing it whole. The estate, once a symbol of wealth and power, was now a roaring inferno, the glow of the fire visible for miles. Paramedics and firefighters scrambled, their shouts barely piercing through the suffocating heat. McNabb pushed through the crowd, his guts twisting. Tell me someone got out. His voice was sharp, desperate. The fire chief turned, his face pale. Nobody made it, Detective. McNabb's breath hitched. What do you mean, nobody? The chief wiped sweat from his forehead, eyes haunted. We got the fire contained enough to look inside. And, the chief swallowed, there were muffins, sir. McNabb's chest locked. Muffins? The chief nodded. A tray placed right in the center of the dining table. McNab gritted his teeth. And the bodies? The chief hesitated. We found something in the ovens. The world tilted. McNab turned toward the flames, eyes burning from more than just the smoke. Because he knew. They hadn't just burned, they had been cooked, and he had been too slow to stop it. Again, the Muffin Man, a job well done. Far from the ashes of the Hollywood Hills, the Muffin Man sat at a quiet table in a small cafe, sipping his coffee. The TV mounted on the wall played breaking news. Tragedy in the Hollywood Hills tonight as the Carmichael family perished in a fire that authorities are calling deeply disturbing. Smiled. The fear was growing. The city was slipping deeper into his world. And McNab? McNab was exactly where he wanted him. Broken, chasing shadows, losing every time. He lifted a fresh muffin from his plate, took a slow, deliberate bite, sighed in satisfaction, because nothing in the world tasted sweeter than revenge. And Los Angeles was still so very hungry. Chapter X, the next course. The city was still burning in fear. The Carmichael family's death wasn't just another murder. It was a statement, a message to Los Angeles, a reminder that the Muffin Man was no longer just a killer. He was inevitable. And now it was time for something new, something bigger, something the city would never recover from. The preparation. Peter walked through a dimly lit storage room, his fingers lightly brushing over carefully arranged baking supplies. But these weren't for muffins, not yet. On a metal table in front of him, photos were neatly placed. Pictures of families, parents, children, each one carefully selected, each one about to disappear. Peter picked one up, the Ramirez family, 5 members, a mother, a father, 3 children. Perfect. His fingers drummed against the table. Then he reached for a cassette tape. A fresh one, blank, waiting. Because before he struck again, he needed to send another message, a final warning, a way to tell the city that their nightmares were about to get worse. And as he slid the tape into the recorder, pressing play, he began to hum the Dead Man's tune. Because when the Ramirez family heard it, they would know. They were already in the Blueberry Zone. And this time, there would be no escape. Checks. The Ramirez family's last night. The Ramirez family had no idea they were already marked. Dinner had been normal. Laughter, stories, plans for the weekend. But as they sat together in their modest East LA home, the world around them had already begun to shift. They just didn't know it yet. Because somewhere in the dark corners of the city, a tape had been delivered, and the moment the news stations played it, their fate was sealed. The tape that doomed them. It arrived at KXLA Studios just after 8 p.m. No return address, no fingerprints, just a cassette tape wrapped neatly in a blue ribbon. The producer hesitated. The last time a tape had come in, it had shut the city down. But curiosity was a sickness, and so they played it, static. Then his voice. Good evening, Los Angeles. A pause, soft, slow humming, the Dead Man's tune. Tonight, we bake something special. A family dish, made with love, laughter, and just the right amount of fear. Another pause. Then, the sound of an oven door creaking open. And finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, sleep tight, Ramirez family. The station cut the feed, but it was too late, because the Ramirez family had already heard it. And now, they were already in the Blueberry Zone. The shift. Back at the Ramirez house, the family had just finished cleaning up when the air turned thick. The youngest, Isabella, was the first to notice. Mommy, it smells funny. Maria Ramirez frowned, sniffing the air. There was a sweetness to it, like something baking, but they hadn't made dessert. Then, the lights flickered. Luis, the father, sighed, Damn power grid, I'll check the breaker. But before he could move, the Dead Man's tune began to play. Not from the TV, not from a radio. It came from inside the house, soft at first, then louder. The children froze. Maria's blood ran cold. And Luis? Luis turned toward the front door and saw the first drop of blue syrup leak from the ceiling. The Blueberry Zone takes them, Marken. The floor beneath them turned soft, sticky, Maria grabbed Isabella, pulling her close. Luis, what's happening? Luis reached for the door, but there was no door anymore. Just a deep blue hallway that hadn't been there before. The kitchen warped, the dining table stretching unnaturally, the chairs melted into the floor. And at the far end of the room, where the oven had been, stood a figure, smiling, waiting, the Muffin Man. He lifted a baking tray, 5 empty muffin cups, waiting to be filled. Welcome, Ramirez family. Dinner is served, Maria screamed, but the walls had already swallowed the sound. Because in the Blueberry Zone, there was no way out, and soon there would be no one left to save. Chapter X. The warning comes too late. McNabb had barely gotten through the front doors of the precinct when Sandoval caught him by the arm. You need to see this. Now. The urgency in his voice sent an immediate chill down McNabb's spine. What happened? Sandoval didn't answer. He just led McNabb to the monitoring room, where a dozen officers were gathered, staring at a live news broadcast. McNabb's stomach dropped. The screen showed static for a moment. Then, the image shifted. A cassette tape wrapped in a blue ribbon, and then the dead man's tune. The station had cut the feed almost immediately, but the damage had already been done. Because the moment McNabb read the final words spoken on that tape, "Sleep tight, Ramirez family," he knew. He knew exactly what was happening, and that he was already too late. The race against the inevitable. McNabb's cruiser tore down the freeway, sirens screaming. Dispatch, I need all available units at 1907 Crestview Drive. Now! Static. Then, a voice. Sir, we're getting multiple distress calls from that location. What kind of calls? McNabb's hands were white-knuckled on the wheel. A pause. Then, something that made his blood turn to ice. Sir, the neighbors say the house is changing. McNabb's heart slammed. Say that again? The house, detective. They're saying the walls are turning blue. Arrival at the Blueberry Zone. McNabb jumped out of his car before it even stopped rolling. Officers were already there, weapons drawn, flashlights cutting through the night. But it didn't matter, because the house in front of them, it wasn't just a house anymore. It was something else. The walls were dark blue, pulsing, wet. The windows had melted away. The front door was gone. And the scent, God, the scent. Burnt sugar, melted flesh. McNabb took a shaky breath, because he knew. The Ramirez family was already inside, and unless he figured out how to break the Muffin Man's hold, they were never coming back. Chapter X. Breaking into Hell. McNabb didn't hesitate. He stormed toward the house, his boots squelching against the pavement. The air was thick, suffocating. The closer he got, the harder it became to breathe. Because this wasn't just a crime scene. This was the Blueberry Zone, and McNabb had no idea how to get inside. The walls were alive. Sir, you can't go in there. Sandoval's voice barely cut through the chaos. McNabb ignored him. He reached for the front door, but there was no door anymore. The wood had transformed into something wet and pulpy, like overripe fruit left to rot. And when McNabb pressed his hand against it, the wall moved. It inhaled. A slow, shuddering breath, like the house was alive. McNabb ripped his hand away, stomach twisting. This wasn't just a house anymore. This was a trap, a doorway to something that shouldn't exist. And the Ramirez family was trapped inside. The sound of screaming, then a noise from within. A shriek, high, desperate, a child's scream. No, please, let us out. McNabb's pulse spiked. Ramirez family, if you can hear me, call out. More screams. But this time, they weren't coming from inside the house. They were coming from every direction. From the ground, the air, the walls themselves. The voices blended together, overlapping, shrieking, pleading. Other victims. People who had been taken into the Blueberry Zone before. People who had never escaped. And then, all at once, the voices stopped. Replaced by something worse. The dead man's tune. Slow. Warped. Wrong. And McNabb knew. If he didn't get inside right now, the Ramirez family was about to become another batch of muffins. One last chance. McNabb steeled himself. He wasn't going to let them die. He pressed his hand back against the blue, pulsing wall. It was warm, sticky, and this time he didn't pull away. "Take me instead." The moment the words left his lips, the wall lurched. The house groaned. And before McNab could even react, the blueberry zone swallowed him whole. Chapter X, The Call from Hell. McNab barely had time to react. The walls lurched. The ground vanished. The world around him twisted into something else. He wasn't in Los Angeles anymore. He was in the blueberry zone. And that's when his phone rang. Unknown call. The sound was wrong. His usual ringtone, distorted, stretched, warped. McNab's stomach coiled. He pulled out his phone, hands trembling. The screen read, he already knew who it was. Slowly he pressed accept. Brought the phone to his ear. And then, the voice. Smooth, calm. "Hello, Johnny." McNab's jaw locked. "Where are they?" A chuckle. Soft, condescending. "Oh, they're here, Johnny. They're right where they belong. Let them go, Peter." McNab's voice was gritted, raw. "No." McNab gritted his teeth. "I swear to God, if you hurt them..." "Hurt them?" Peter interrupted, feigning mock surprise. Johnny, I'm baking them. There's a difference." The ovens roared to life. In the distance, screams. McNab's pulse exploded. "Peter, tick-tock, Johnny, you're running out of time." A pause. Then a final whisper. And the best part, Mick froze. "You're already in the oven, too." Click, the line went dead. And McNab? McNab had never been so scared in his life. Trapped inside the oven. McNab staggered. The phone slipped from his fingers, landing with a wet, sticky squelch on the floor, because the floor wasn't solid anymore. It was soft, thick, sinking, like he was standing in a giant vat of half-mixed batter. The air was hot now, the heat pressed against his skin, rolling in waves, coming from every direction. Because Peter wasn't lying. McNab wasn't just in the blueberry zone. He was in the oven, and the temperature was rising. The screams get louder. Somewhere ahead, the Ramirez family was still screaming. McNab forced himself forward. Every step was harder than the last, his boots sinking into the floor like something was grabbing him, trying to pull him under. He reached the first doorway. The walls breathed around him, pulsing like living flesh. Then, a whisper. "Too slow, Johnny." McNab whirled around, but there was no one there. Just darkness, and the sickly, rotting sweet smell of burned sugar. The final bake begins. The oven dials clicked. Somewhere deeper inside, the flames roared higher, and McNab knew he was out of time. "Ramirez family!" he shouted. No response. Then a new sound. A metal tray sliding onto a rack. McNab's blood ran cold. The bake had already started. And at the bake, he forced himself forward, pushing through the sticky, suffocating heat. The next room stretched out in front of him, a kitchen. A table covered in mixing bowls, bags of flour, and on the far end an industrial oven. Its door sealed shut. McNab's breath hitched. He could see shadows moving inside. The Ramirez family, trapped, burning, dying. And beside the oven, standing calmly, the Muffin Man, watching, waiting, smiling. "Welcome to the final bake, Johnny."
Having a little bit of tech issues, you guys. Hold on here. Okay. Back on.
Chapter text, the final bake. McNab didn't hesitate. He lunged. But the Muffin Man was faster. Peter sidestepped effortlessly, his smile never fading, as McNab stumbled forward, boots sinking into the pulpy blue floor. The heat was unbearable now. The oven roared, the metal glowing red-hot, and inside, the Ramirez family was pounding on the glass, screaming. McNabb gritted his teeth. "Open it, Peter." Peter chuckled. Johnny, do you even know where you are?" McNabb's breathing was ragged, his pulse pounding in his skull. "I know enough." Peter's eyes gleamed. "Then tell me, Johnny." He took a slow step forward. "If the oven isn't real," another step, "and the Blueberry Zone doesn't exist." He leaned in. "Then what happens when you die here?" The cracking reality. McNabb felt it before he saw it. The world shifting. Like a house built on an earthquake, the floor pulsed, the walls groaned. And for the first time, Peter frowned. McNabb latched onto it. "You're afraid." "Of what?" McNabb took a shaky step forward. "That I'll figure it out." Another tremor. The oven door rattled behind them. The Ramirez family was still trapped, still baking. But McNabb was getting closer. "This place, it's built on fear. But what happens if I stop being afraid?" Peter's jaw clenched. The Blueberry Zone shuddered. The walls darkened, deep cracks spider-webbing through them. Peter grinned again, but it was thinner this time. "You can try, Johnny." He reached behind him, gripping a butcher's knife. "But I don't think you'll last long enough." The final move. McNabb had seconds. He could fight Peter, or he could break the Blueberry Zone itself. And if he was right, if this place was only real because they believed it was, then all he had to do was stop believing and take the Muffin Man with him. He turned to the Ramirez family, trapped inside the inferno. "You're not burning." Their screams hitched. McNabb stepped forward, forcing himself to see past the illusion. "The heat isn't real. The oven isn't real. None of this is real." The flames flickered. The metal door wavered, as if struggling to exist. "And, Peter?" "Shut up!" McNabb slammed his fist against the oven. "You're not dying. You can leave. Open the door and step out." The Ramirez family hesitated. Then, the father reached for the handle. Peter lunged. McNabb was faster. He threw himself into Peter, tackling him to the ground. Howell thrashing against him, but McNabb didn't let go. Because the moment the oven door swung open, the entire Blueberry Zone began to collapse. Out of the nightmare, Mick gasped. The air was cold, sharp. He was on his back. The Ramirez family was on the ground beside him, shaking, breathing, alive. The oven was gone. The house was just a house again. But Peter? Peter was nowhere. And McNabb knew this wasn't over. Not yet, because the Blueberry Zone had let them go, but it had kept him. Somewhere, in the dark corners of the city, the Muffin Man was still smiling, still waiting, still hungry.
Man, I hope you guys are enjoying it as much as I am, man. These are stories that I have written and I have tweaked, obviously, but from the mind of myself, you know what I mean? The Muffin Man. Like I say, I got another one coming out this Friday. It's called They Came From Outside. Like I say, I got a premiere for it. It's gonna be a Friday at 8 o'clock. And that particular series, I'm gonna drop that every Friday. That's a little bit more deeper than this one, a little bit more complex. So that's gonna be a once a weeker right here. Let me hit you guys with the final chapter with this one right here, you guys, before we end it.
Chapters: No more escapes. Los Angeles barely had time to breathe. The Ramirez family had been saved. McNabb had pulled them from the Blueberry Zone. For the first time, the Muffin Man had lost. But that only meant one thing. He needed to remind the city who was in control. And this time, no one was getting out. The Bakersfield family. The Bakersfields were ordinary. A mother, a father, 2 young kids. They lived in a quiet neighborhood, far from the chaos, far from the murders. They didn't even think about the Muffin Man anymore. But that night, he thought about them. And as they slept soundly in their beds, a melody began to drift through the house, soft, low, a tune no one wanted to hear. The Dead Man's Tune. Trapped in the bake. Mrs. Bakersfield was the first to wake. She smelled it. Sweet, burnt, rotting. Like something was cooking in the kitchen. She sat up, blinking through the darkness. That's when she saw the walls. They weren't their walls anymore. They were blue, dripping, pulsing. Her breath hitched. Honey? Her voice trembled. But when she turned to shake her husband, he was gone. The kitchen of no return. She stumbled forward, bare feet sinking into the mushy blue floor. Her hands shook as she reached for the bedroom door. But there was no door. Just a long, endless hallway leading straight to the kitchen. And from the shadows, something moved. The oven clicked on. A tray slid into place. And then from the darkness, you woke up just in time. A figure emerged, calm, smiling, holding a mixing bowl. Now let's get cooking. By morning, they were gone. The neighbors saw nothing. No forced entry. No screams. No struggle. The Bakersfields had simply disappeared. The only thing left behind, a tray of fresh muffins cooling on the kitchen counter. And on the dining table, written in deep red syrup, no more escapes.
So I hope you guys like that. Part 5 today, Rise of the Blueberry Zone. Like I say, I got a lot more written to it. I'm going to add to it. I'll be dropping another one tomorrow. Thanks for joining me today in the Mushroom Kingdom. And like I said, man, all type of stuff goes on right here.